Welcome to Credit and Bankruptcy with Reed Allmand. Reclaim your power for financial independence. And now, your host, Reed Allmand.
Hello, I'm Reed Allmand, and we're here to help you reclaim your financial independence. And so today we have a very special program scheduled for you. We're going to talk about what happens when somebody's already in a bankruptcy case, but they need to incur debt to replace a vehicle or purchase a new home, and how exactly they go about that. And it's kind of jurisdictional specific. Different court jurisdictions have different procedures. And so we're going to dive in that today, get down the weeds. And I have a special guest with me, Manny. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And Manny, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Manny Robles. I've been with the firm for a little over 2 years. I am one of the post-petition paralegals, but I also manage the part of the post department.
And you kind of handle a lot of these requests to incur debt during bankruptcy, isn't that right?
I do, yes.
So you're the designated expert. All right, so how often do you think it happens, when somebody's in a bankruptcy case where they're going to need to replace a vehicle, or they want to refinance a mortgage, or buy a new property? What usually happens, and kind of tell us those fact patterns of what leads to that.
Sure, so absolutely. So we see it a lot. We see clients frequently that are either in the middle of their bankruptcy and a car, for example, just completely breaks down, okay, or they're involved in a car accident, and obviously that car may be totaled out. And so what they need to do is replace that vehicle. And a lot of our clients, operating under the assumption that it's going to be impossible for them to do it, or it's going to be very difficult. And that's just not the case. First off, the process is very straightforward. Okay, typically it's not very involved. Okay, there's a few things that we need as a firm in order to initiate the process for incurring debt, whether that's for a car, whether that's for a new home, or whatever the case may be.
Right, and a lot of people are really surprised when they find out that they can actually purchase a vehicle or purchase a house, while they're in the bankruptcy. The bankruptcy hasn't even been completed yet.
That's correct, yeah. So there's a couple of different scenarios that could play out. So, for example, the great thing is if you're in a Chapter 7, you actually don't have to seek court approval for the purchase of a new vehicle or the purchase of a new home. You can do that even prior to your discharge. And a lot of our clients actually end up finding that they, in the view of the lender, they're actually a better candidate. And that's because that, if while in a Chapter 7, they seek, they seek to go get a loan, okay? Right. In the event that 6 months from now, they get that loan, and 6 months from that point, they default on that loan, okay? The lender knows that they can't turn around and go get another discharge of that debt. So They actually end up being a better candidate from the lender's perspective.
Okay. So you've already kind of gone over a little bit of Chapter 7. So basically an individual who's considering bankruptcy usually chooses between two chapters of bankruptcy, right?
That's
Chapter
correct.
7 and Chapter 13. And Chapter 7, like you were talking about, is for people who are below a certain income level and they're eligible to file the bankruptcy case, list all of their credit cards, medical bills, all their unsecured debt, and then within a few months after filing, erase all that debt.
That's correct.
And then they're out of bankruptcy. And then a Chapter 13, on the other hand, is a repayment plan. And so that's for people who are looking to maybe don't qualify for 7 because they make too much income, and they're going to pay a certain percentage back to those creditors, or they're looking to take care of mortgage arrears or refinance a car or other things in a payment plan that usually lasts 3 to 5 years.
Correct.
So I'm glad you started with Chapter 7, because a lot of people, when they're going into bankruptcy, we did another credit and bankruptcy podcast where we talked about what are the options after you file a Chapter 7 with your vehicle. So we talked about refinancing the vehicle basically through the process of redemption, which is a legal term where after you file the case, you can pay just the balance you owe, the value of the property rather than the balance. So if you're upside down on the car, you refinance just the portion of the value that can help you out a lot. And then we also talked about reaffirmation agreements, reaffirming the debt, as well as just surrendering it. And we spent a lot of detail going over that and kind of when people make that decision. So if they chose a decision to replace the vehicle because it's not reliable or they got a bad deal, they can do so right after the case is filed, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so that's the best way to go about it. And you touched on some of the factors on why somebody would want to even loan them money, right?
Yeah.
Because most people think, I'm never going to be able to get a car loan. So can you dive in that a little bit deeper and tell me why would a lender even consider giving somebody a loan?
Well, There's a lot of different reasons that they might consider giving someone a loan. But again, one of the main things from the lender's perspective, okay, is that it's an opportunity for them to sell a vehicle. I mean, for them to actually, sorry, I don't know the answer for that one.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you just pick back, because we were talking about why would a lender want to to make a loan to somebody who's in a Chapter 7, and you talked about a little bit earlier where you talked about the fact that they're not going to be eligible to file another bankruptcy case for 8 years,
right?
And then that way the creditor knows that if they default on the loan, they're not going to be able to wipe out their debt.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, and so ultimately, from the creditor's perspective, from the lender's perspective, they are going to be a safer bet, because you're right. If they were to default on their loan, a few months down the line after having, already purchased the vehicle or the home or whatever the case may be, the lender knows that they can't turn around and go file another Chapter 7 and discharge that debt for 8 years.
Right.
And so it's a safer bet on their end, because they know that they're going to be able to go ahead and, pursue collection attempts.
Right. And also another reason is because they're eligible to pay the payment, and they know that they're not going to have divided loyalties, because a lot of the debt that they were carrying that would take up their disposable income every month has now been freed up. And so now they have more income coming in the household and a better opportunity to be able to pay back that debt. Right. What does the interest rate look like when somebody is purchasing a car right after a Chapter 7 filing?
It varies. It varies client to client. But typically, they are going to receive better interest rates than what they would have prior to filing the bankruptcy itself.
That's right. You're right. It kind of depends on different factors. One of the things we offer at Allmand Law Firm is when somebody retains us and we're getting ready to file, we pull their credit score for what it is as of that day and predict what it could be 1 year after the bankruptcy discharge. Mm-hmm. Now, ideally, if you could choose when you need to replace a car, which oftentimes you can't,
right?
You would want to ideally maybe purchase that vehicle a year after the bankruptcy case has been discharged, and you're able to go through the process of rebuilding your credit and getting that credit score up higher. Because typically we see people raise their credit score between 20 to 50 points.
Absolutely.
A year after the bankruptcy discharge. But sometimes life happens and you can't make that choice. So if you do get a car that has a high interest rate, a year after the bankruptcy discharge, if you're doing those things to improve your credit, then you can always refinance, trade in the vehicle, and get something with a lower interest rate.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. So we've kind of talked about the Chapter 7 process. If somebody files and they want to replace the vehicle. Let's talk about Chapter 13. How is Chapter 13 different from Chapter 7 regarding a request to incur debt?
Sure. So the incurring debt process for Chapter 13 is going to be just a little more involved, okay? Because in a Chapter 13, we do have to seek court approval for any incurring of debt that happens while the bankruptcy is active. So, like you said earlier, it does vary division to division. In the Northern District, rather, we have two options to incur new debt, okay? One of which is called the request to incur debt. Now, this is specific to vehicle purchases. Okay.
And when you say Northern District, you're talking about the Northern District of Texas Bankruptcy Court?
That's correct.
And so within that division, you have you actually have two divisions. You have the Fort Worth Division, the Dallas Division, and then also Abilene and Lubbock, et cetera. But we're specifically going to dive into Fort Worth and Dallas.
That's correct.
Okay. So go ahead.
So in the Dallas Division, what we have the opportunity to do is something that's called a request to incur debt. Now, what we need in order for that to be an option for the client is going to have their case already confirmed. Okay, we can't do this request to incur debt process prior to the cases being confirmed. Now, the request to incur debt process itself is actually very fast. It's actually a streamlined version of what we used to do, which is called the motion to incur debt, which I'll go into in a little bit. In order to pursue the request to incur debt, we need a buyer's order, okay? And that buyer's order has to feature terms that fall within a very specific set of parameters set forth by the trustee, okay? If the buyer's order, and which is effectively the deal, if the deal meets these parameters set forth by the trustee, then the request will be approved, okay? And the turnaround time on this is about a week to a week and a half in Dallas.
Okay. And so the reason why I assume that they did this process was when people need a car, they need a car.
Right.
I mean, they don't really have a lot of time to waste. And the traditional process of filing a motion, noticing your creditors, having a hearing, getting an order can take 30, 45, 60 days.
Yep.
And that's a long time to wait to not have a vehicle. And so what the trustee has done is they've given some parameters that they've discussed, with the judges, and they know in this division that they will get approved. And so can you tell me what are those kind of conditions based on what type of car they can get?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a few things that are involved. Okay, so for the in Dallas and in Fort Worth, you cannot pursue the request to incur debt process with a vehicle that you're going to have to finance more than $22,000 total. Okay, you can't finance more than $22,000.
Okay.
One of the other stipulations is that the payments cannot exceed $500 per month. Okay. The interest rate can't exceed 21%. Okay. Now, here's a big one. There's no luxury vehicles. Okay, so any kind of BMW, any Audi, any Mercedes-Benz, that if you're looking for that kind of car, the request to incur debt process is not going to be an option for you. Okay, that's something that the trustee is very firm on. And another stipulation of the request to incur debt process is that you can't finance any additional warranties, gap insurance, or anything else like that. So it really has to be vehicle only. That needs to be the purchase agreement. Now, if you want to pay for these things in cash, you can absolutely do that, but you cannot finance these things through the request to incur debt process.
Right. And it may be good to touch on the public, kind of the policy or the reason why this process of reviewing and approving incurring debt even exists in a Chapter 13, because in a Chapter 13 you're devoting all of your disposable income into a payment plan for that 3 to 5 years. And in theory, you don't have any additional revenue available to you because you're taking care of your housing, your food, your necessities, and all those kinds of things. And so if you were to go and get a Mercedes for $80,000 and then you have a $1,200 or $1,300 payment, obviously that's going to affect your ability to make your other payments or potentially income that could be devoted towards your plan.
Exactly.
And so what you were going over right now, those parameters of financing $22,000 or less, interest rate below 21%, no gap insurance, warranties, or anything included in the financing. And there's one other, what was that? No luxury vehicles, and the monthly payment is $500 or less.
Right.
So all those things are what the trustee will automatically be unopposed to, which means that if you have a buyer's order and a purchase that is within those parameters, then it's automatically going to get approved in most cases.
That's correct.
That doesn't mean that you can't finance something that is more than $22,000 or a higher payment than $500. It just means we have to go through the long process of filing the motion.
That's correct.
And I can think of a client before where we've done that. I mean, the fact pattern doesn't come up very often, but they actually had to have a special vehicle because they were handicapped. And so they needed a van with a ramp, et cetera, and we just couldn't find one for $22,000 or less. So they had to purchase something a little bit more expensive. And we filed the motion, explained the need for that, and we were able to get that approved. So
that's awesome.
So that's important to consider. So what would you say, if we're talking about steps here, step one, my car was just totaled. I need a way to get back to work. I'm in an active Chapter 13 case. What's the first thing I do?
You need to go find a car. You need to go to the dealership. Honestly, let me back it up. Really, you need to contact our office. Okay, contact our office. We'll be able to explain the request to incur debt process to you. We'll provide you with all the forms required. And what I like to do is give the client the request to incur debt form itself to take with them to the car dealership. Now, most car dealerships, they're familiar with the bankruptcy process. This request to incur debt process has actually been in place for about 2 years now. And so if you present this paper to them, when you're going to look for a new car, they're going to know exactly what you can and what you can't buy. Okay, and it's going to expedite the process.
And we try to help our clients out too a little bit. We have a list of, about 10 or 12 car dealers that are already familiar with this process. So it'll be, a little bit easier for the client, because sometimes some car dealers are not familiar with this process. So that helps them out a lot. So the first thing is contact your attorney and then go shopping.
That's right.
Okay, and then hopefully we're going to shop and find something that fits the parameters for automatic approval.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yep.
So now we've done that. They've notified the office. They've found a vehicle. They've gotten the car dealer to give them the terms on like a term sheet, which they call a buyer's order.
Correct.
And so what we do is we say we want to buy a car like this one, and if this one is not available after we get approved for financing, we want approval to get a similar car under the same terms.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so one of the great things about the request to incur debt process is because, as many of us know, if a car dealership can sell the car, they will, okay? So oftentimes, even though the turnaround time is pretty quick for the request to incur debt process, by the time they receive approval, that car may no longer be available.
Okay.
But the approval letter that we receive actually stipulates that the that the request to incur debt is approved for that vehicle or a vehicle with similar terms.
Right. Okay. So now we're moving on to step 2. They've notified us, they've done their shopping, found their car, have their buyer's order. What is step number 2?
Step number 2 is going to be, first, providing our office with all proof of income for the past 60 days, okay? At that point, they'll need to schedule a meeting with one of our Allmand Law team members, because what we'll have to do is amend their schedules in order to demonstrate feasibility to the trustee. And what I mean by feasibility is we have to demonstrate to the trustee that they can not only pay for this new car payment, but also their ongoing expenses and their trustee payment. So we have to demonstrate that they have the ability to pay all these things so that it doesn't further complicate their Chapter 13.
Right. You know, that raises a good point, because the vehicle that is no longer working, that has either broken down or is involved in an accident, they may have been paying for that vehicle directly outside of the bankruptcy, or they might have been taking advantage of the option to kind of refinance or restructure the terms of the car note in a bankruptcy payment, where oftentimes they can reduce the principal balance, reduce the interest, and pay it off under more favorable terms. So we need to change their plan. You know, we need to say that old car, we got to make some amendments. We're pulling it out of the plan, or they're not paying for it anymore. Therefore, they have freed up some resources.
Exactly.
And now we need to apply this new car payment, disclose that, and do that on the bankruptcy schedules. And that means that we're going to have to get the information from the client about their income, expenses, and get an up-to-date budget. And then we may have to do a plan. So that process involves the consumer, the bankruptcy client, getting in touch with us, our law firm attorneys and paralegals, to go over those schedules and get them drafted. And then the client has to sign them, correct? And then we file them with the court. So step 2 we've determined is we've got to amend the schedules.
All right, correct.
Okay. And they provide the buyer's order. They provide, in step 2, their pay stubs showing their current income, as well as amend those schedules. What is step 3?
Step 3 is going to be our job, okay? So we're going to be filing these documents. We're going to be uploading these documents to the trustee, okay? Once we have, and we've verified that we have all the supporting documents that we need in order to get the request to incur debt approved, then it's a matter of waiting a week to a week and a half. And typically we see the approval letters coming very quickly. We typically receive them by email, and so we'll forward those on to the client before they actually receive the letter in the mail.
What if somebody can't wait a week? I mean, it is really urgent and they're going to lose their job or something, and they don't have any alternate. Can we speed that up a little bit?
We can. Okay, so on a case-by-case basis, we can contact the trustee's office directly and explain to them the situation and the need for expediency. Right. And sometimes they can push it through. But I've seen it done as short as 3 days.
Right. So we're just going to basically, every case is an individual case, different fact patterns. We're going to determine what our client's needs are and make sure that those needs are met.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So you can't get to step number 3 unless you do 1 and 2, right?
That's correct.
Is that a common kind of issue sometimes with clients wanting to incur debt?
Absolutely. So, when clients ask me how difficult is it to get a new car, I say it's not. As long as you provide the documents to us in a timely fashion and you do everything that you give us everything that we need, we can get it taken care of very quickly. But we need these things in order to have that request to incur debt approved.
Right. And if you're wondering like what car dealer you need to talk to, or how this process is going to work actually interacting with the car dealer, I have another credit and bankruptcy episode coming up in which I'm going to talk with Michael Daniels, who is at Freeman Toyota, and he's going to go through the process from their perspective and what they see with clients and stuff. So we'll fill you in if you want to check out that podcast as well. All right, so anything else we need to talk about for Chapter 13 regarding incurring debt?
Yeah, one thing I would like to point out is things happen, life happens, okay? And so sometimes there is a period before your case is confirmed that your car may break down before that. And if that happens, we still have the option to do the motion to incur debt process as well. And we can even expedite that matter if we need to, okay? I just want to make that clear because there are situations where it just can't wait until the case is confirmed.
Right. And so we can go into a little bit without hopefully not getting too much into the weeds and getting people confused. But in a Chapter 13, there's a process that you have to go through in order to successfully complete the plan. So you propose a payment plan, and then you have to have an opportunity for creditors and the trustee and the judge to approve it.
That's right.
And so that process is called confirmation, right? And so the reason why most creditors are wanting to wait until after confirmation before they make a loan to somebody is, what if it doesn't get confirmed? What if it gets dismissed? Now I've got a new car loan that maybe is going to be outside of bankruptcy, or maybe the debtor may convert to Chapter 7. And so they want to make sure that that plan is solid and that the debtor's in that plan for the long haul, and it's past that first real tough step. Because once it's confirmed, as long as you make your payments on time, you're pretty much going to have smooth sailing.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, so we were talking primarily just now about the process in Dallas.
Correct.
Which has the request form, which is a more informal process. Would you say, though, that pretty much the same elements as far as the steps go apply to the other jurisdictions as well?
I would say that it's true in all jurisdictions, yes. The steps themselves are the same. The things that we need are going to be the same. Some of the parameters are a bit different.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So a lot of our clients live in the Fort Worth area. So you've got, Weatherford, Fort Worth, and some different surrounding counties around there where they're in the Fort Worth division. And so in that division, there is not an informal request process to incur debt. A motion still needs to be filed.
It's actually in Fort Worth, it's the request to incur debt process.
Okay, great. Well, tell me how is that different from Chapter 13?
So in Fort Worth, the process is actually very much the same. The only difference is the turnaround time, I would say. Fort Worth actually turns theirs around typically within 3 to 4 days, and sometimes sooner. But for the most part, the request to incur debt process is the same. In fact, it's the same form.
Okay. So Dallas and Fort Worth are very similar. The main difference is just the approval time.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Are the terms the same as far as the $22,000 for the principal, $500 for the car payment, less than 21% interest?
It's exactly the same.
No luxury vehicles. Okay. So what if somebody lives in Collin County and they're in the Plano division? What do they need to do to incur debt up there?
So the process is there are two different scenarios, okay? So there's still the motion to incur debt process, okay? But there's also the request to incur debt process. They just don't have the same parameters that the Dallas and Fort Worth divisions do. So give me just a moment. Sorry, I should have had that pulled up. Okay. Can you ask the question again?
Sure.
Sorry.
So if one of our clients who lives in Plano, in Collin County or surrounding areas, they're going to be in the Plano division. So how would they go about the process to incur debt in that division?
Sure. So the process is actually very similar, okay? The parameters are a bit different though. And the process by which we go through getting the approval changes a little bit in Eastern. So for example, the payments in Eastern cannot exceed $500. The total purchase price cannot exceed $20,000. Now, what's interesting is there's actually no restrictions on the type of vehicle they can buy. So there's no restrictions on the luxury vehicle, and there's no restriction on the term rate.
Okay, the interest rate.
I'm sorry, the interest rate or the term length.
The length of the loan.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And so the process, as far as like the steps we talked about earlier, step one, notifying your attorney, going out and doing your shopping, find your buyer's order. Number two, amending your schedules. And then number three is so they have the option to file the motion or also do an informal request as well?
That's correct. Depending on the stage of the bankruptcy, yes, we still have both of those options. The process is a little bit different. There's no forms to fill out. We just communicate directly with the trustee, and that's how we navigate that process for the request to incur debt in Eastern.
Okay. Wonderful. And so now, as far as attorney's fees go, this process, of filing the motion, having meetings, that's some additional attorney time and resources that is not originally contemplated in the main flat fee associated with the bankruptcy. So could you share with everyone approximately like what they're looking at as far as attorney's fees in the Dallas and Fort Worth division as well as in the Plano division?
Sure. So the Plano division is going to be $400 for a request to incur debt. Now, in the event that we have to do a motion to incur debt, it is going to be $650. The reason for the difference in fee is going to be the element of having to send an attorney down to hearing. Okay. That is going to be attorney time that we will have to expend, and so that accounts for the difference in price.
Okay.
Now, for the Dallas division and the Fort Worth division, the price is $200 for the request to incur debt process. For the motion to incur debt in the Dallas and Fort Worth division, it's $400. So really, the request to incur debt process, not only is it much quicker, but it's also much less expensive.
Okay. And so if somebody is having financial difficulties and in bankruptcy and they need to take care of those fees and they're not able to pay them all in one lump sum at the same time they're buying a vehicle, is there anything that we offer that kind of helps them out to get those fees paid?
Yes, sometimes we can put these fees into the plan, okay, and we can have it spread out over the remainder of their bankruptcy term.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so anything else related to incurring debt in a Chapter 13 that you would like to share with people who are in a Chapter 13? Any tips or strategies?
Absolutely. When going to go car shopping or trying to incur debt, one of the things that I will always tell the client is that you need to make sure that the buyer's order is very clear and everything is spelled out very plainly, okay? Because one way that we can avoid any kind of objection from the trustee is to just spell everything out in plain English and make sure that everything is very clear on the buyer's order itself. After we have that, we can take care of the rest.
Okay, wonderful. And so we've talked about cars a lot so far. Is the process different for somebody who's wanting to refinance a mortgage or purchase a new home?
Sure. So the purchasing of a new home is something that we see actually a lot. A lot of the times we have clients that are either in apartments where the rent is just constantly increasing, or they want to build equity, and that's something that can happen while in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The process that we have to pursue for that is always going to be the motion to incur debt. There's a couple of things we need. The first step is you need to go find a home. I should say, contact us. We'll kind of explain to you what we're going to need from you leading up to that. But buying a home's a big process, and so a lot of the legwork is going to be on the client. Finding the home that they want to buy, and then securing the financing for that home.
Right. It's shocking to a lot of people that you can actually qualify to purchase a home while you're in bankruptcy. And so we have another episode coming up on credit and bankruptcy, and we're going to talk with Sean Bone, who's a mortgage broker, and he's going to tell us exactly what are the eligibility terms, when can somebody seek that approval to get those loans in a Chapter 13. And so what we're going over right now is the process of once the loan is already in place, we found somebody who's willing to do the purchase and help the clients, get those financing terms together. And you may be wondering, why would somebody, purchase a house in the bankruptcy? That seems maybe extravagant, right? I mean, why can't they just keep on doing what they've been doing? And we've come across many clients who actually are paying more in rent than what they would be if they actually purchased a home. And so in those situations, when they file the bankruptcy case, they've kind of got their credit under control. They're not having to spend their additional disposable income on things that is not going to be taken care of in the bankruptcy. They can afford to get approved for the purchase, get into a home, and pay less per month.
That's absolutely right. We see it a lot, especially in North Texas. Rent is not cheap here. We often see clients that are paying, north of $1,000 a month in rent when they could have a mortgage where they're paying much less and build equity.
All right. So to recap, what we want everyone to be aware of is if you're looking to purchase a vehicle or purchase a home or refinance a home while your bankruptcy case is active, the first thing you need to reach out to Allmand Law Firm or your attorney and ask them what the process is. And we've discussed a quick 3-step process that applies depending on if you're in Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. In Chapter 7, the step process is pretty simple. Just go buy your car. There's no approval process as long as you're making the purchase after the Chapter 7 has been filed. In a Chapter 13, we have that 3-step process. Number 1 is notify us so we can advise you of anything special regarding your case. go shopping and find that vehicle that hopefully is within the parameters that automatically get approved. And to recap really quickly, that is you're purchasing less than $22,000 for the vehicle. The interest rate is 21% or less. The monthly payment is $500 or less. You're not financing any additional warranties or gap insurance into that car note, as well as you're not purchasing any luxury vehicles. So as long as you find a dealer that can write you up a buyer's order with those terms, then you move on to step 2. And step 2 is getting with our office, amending your bankruptcy schedules, providing those forms, as well as your most recent 60 days worth of pay stubs. You sign off on the amended schedules. Now we're ready to submit the packet to the bankruptcy trustee and upload the schedules with the court. Once that is done, then you're just waiting a few days and you get approval. Pretty simple, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank Manny for coming in and helping us, dive through this process. It's been great having you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And so tune in next time when we're going to go over some additional things regarding credit and bankruptcy. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Goodbye.